And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Bud Elliott. That's Danny Kanell. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe. Smash that like and come and join us in the chat, a.k.a. the Cover 3 tailgate, where they are still basking in the Saturday night appearance from the greatest general manager in college football, Barton Simmons. That was just a special show, you know. Loved getting Barton to chime in. They also, and look, we've got a pun further review. You know, we've got a poll assassin. We've got a lot of our normal Monday business. Then later in a pun further review, I know that we want to get into the Alabama defense in general, but Nick jumped in the tailgate. I kid you not, at 5:52 a.m.
Go, Nick.
And brought up something that we had thought about discussing here on the show. Nick says, what do you guys think of the way Malachi Moore was acting towards the end of the Vandy game? Is that something of concern locker room wise? Love the show, by the way. Now, for those who do not understand the context, I'm guessing he's referencing kicking the ball, right?
Do we have the video? Yeah, like he goes and kicks the ball away from the refs, and he's shouting at other players on his defense.
Clint Lamb from Next Round Live did like a 3-minute video on everything because it was a lot. It was even more than kicking the ball. They tried to sub in for him, and he went to Kane Momack and was like, no, and like turned his back. I mean, it's a lengthy ordeal which took place. Like, it's bad. Like, if you haven't seen that video that he did, it's really good. It's really well done. It's not because I know there's a lot of skies falling, like Kalen DeBoer was a mistake takes that are out right now, which are absolutely ridiculous. This one was more like, I do think this is significant. Our own Damian Harris. I don't know if you saw what Damian said. Damian was on his podcast, which he does with The Athletic. And he was like, this is some BS. He's like, if he was in, I mean, it's funny how you can get old manish and you're not that old.
Yeah,
but he's pretty old man.
I love working with him because he has an old school mindset. Like, he very much puts team before me, and I think that's what a lot of Bama players did. He said if that happened in our locker room, we would have torn off the C on his chest. Yeah. Like, so when you hear a former Bama player calling that out, I thought it was too long. Like, I thought you got to contain that emotion past. I get a hit in the moment that does look incredibly dirty. I get that under happening. I may understand, chucking a mouthpiece, but there's no way that happens under Saban. You're too terrified of the consequences. And that to me is, I think, something that could be an issue with a new staff who is, they've taken the approach of, we're going to do what we've always done. And it's been very player friendly, media friendly, and it's awesome. And the players have loved it. The players will walk all over you really fast. And I think that's potentially what you could see happening.
That's not the biggest, there are many more questions to answer. All right. So we've got a little bit of it. Mikey pulling it on the go. We appreciate this. Let's see if we can pull it up on the screen for those watching along on youtube.com/cover3. So this is
that's the hit, the dirty hit, which is clearly dirty. That's frustration.
There's somebody on the grassy knoll.
Then he kicks the ball.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
here he throws his mouthpiece like across the field, which again, I'm not that upset. And he's yelling at the coaches and the staff, like he's yelling at everybody. This is where the last part of it, I think, is where it gets most egregious. When they try to sub in for him, because that's what you would do if you see a player in trouble, like he's lost it and he's blacked out. Like, it happens. You black out and you lose your bleep. Yeah, you're seeing red. Coaches are like, get off the field. And he says no. And they have a sub run out and he turns him back and says, I'm not coming out. That to me was where it became more problematic.
I mean, it's just passion. So I see. Kai wants to win.
I was going to say
it is.
Yeah. Like, a little bit. Like, he clearly cares. And this loss bothers him. I think it's worse when a guy doesn't care, like certain teams laughing on the sidelines when they're losing by 60 or over the weekend. Like, that's probably just okay. Like, they're totally checked out. Like, Malachi Moore is not checked out, but I think he's probably pretty frustrated with his secondary, which, like, Danny, I know you had notes on this. Saban got some stuff wrong in the preseason. Like he said, FSU's defensive line looks like the best in the country, blah, blah, blah. But the one thing he did get right, it looks like now in hindsight, was his concern for this Alabama secondary. And you think back, like, how many good quarters has Alabama's back seven, and specifically the secondary, which is brand new? I mean, they're super young, multiple true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, new transfers coming in. Like, this was Saban's concern, and it has shown in almost every game, whether or not the opponent actually took advantage of it. Like, you go back and think about this. Let's review this season in hindsight. Now, think about what these opponents have done to everyone else, okay? Western Kentucky was pretty clearly playing the wrong quarterback against Alabama. It's not until, Finley got hurt that they put in Veltkamp, and then they cooked Toledo, right? It's like, oh, wait a second. Oh, we're playing the wrong kid. So you effectively faced who should be Western Kentucky's backup. And they had guys wide open, and we pointed it out on the broadcast. They had guys running wide open at secondary, and Finley, the West Kentucky quarterback, just didn't see it. The next week, USF, same deal. They had guys running wide open. Brown, the USF quarterback, he actually saw it, just couldn't hit it. The next week, you face Wisconsin. You don't get a real test there because you knock out Wisconsin's starting quarterback in like the first 10 minutes of the ball game. So all of a sudden, it's all hands on deck with the backup QB for the Badgers, a team that I think most of us faded this preseason pretty hard anyway. And then against Georgia, you played some pretty interesting stuff. You were clearly saving up. It worked for like maybe 20 minutes. Georgia has a receiver run the wrong way on a screen, so you end up getting a pick six the other way, or maybe not pick six, but like an obvious score. And so you have a positive game state to defend Georgia the rest of the game. You're up, 28-0? And Georgia storms all the way back. It's not like the run game did it, right? Like they just dropped back and threw it all over you. I think it's pretty fair to argue that Bama secondary has like one good quarter of play this year. And then against Vandy, like the rotations were all jacked up. Like Vandy had it. They schemed him up and carved him every quarter. It's like maybe Bama secondary just sucks. So far, that's really the only thing I can conclude.
It'll probably improve this Saturday, though. I bet you they play four great quarters
yeah.
against South Carolina. It has been a problem for them all year. Like it hasn't shown in the results, but you're right. Like there have been concerning signs in their secondary all year. They haven't really had to pay the price for it. They paid the price a little bit for it. Like it's not like Vandy was killing them through the air. Vandy was mostly just kind of controlling the clock on the ground, and Diego Pavia was taking stuff that was there. But it is more than anything, to me, we can talk about the secondary, and it is a problem. But the other problem was they were getting blown off the ball by Vanderbilt. Like it's just there's a lot of problems on that side of the ball right now. And then you go to the Malachi Moore thing at the end, and I get like I said, I was kind of joking, just passion. I get why it's a problem, but I also don't completely hate it because if I'm Alabama and I'm losing to Vanderbilt, I kind of hope somebody on my team's pretty pissed off about it, just to be honest with you. So I'm not really going to hold that against Malachi Moore, and I'm not going to do like the sky is falling. Kalen DeBoer has lost control of this program. It wouldn't happen under Nick Saban, blah, blah, blah. I know that's what Alabama fans are doing. But it could just be Vandy's better than you thought. And it's not like Alabama hasn't lost games before. I still think going forward the rest of this season, I don't know if I'm going to call them the top 2 team in the SEC. They might be top 3, maybe top 4, but they're still near the top of that league. And I still think they're going to win most of the games left on their schedule.
All right. So let's play a little game. Is Alabama LSU? There has been a sort of like generalized, discussion that we've had about LSU where it's like, oh, their offense is incredible. They can go and they can hang 40 points on about anybody, but they can't get any stops. And that is ultimately their weakness. Like, has Alabama drifted down to that kind of personality trait?
The front seven is better. I'm pretty sure I think Bama's linebackers are way better than what LSU has.
Deontay Lawson, I still think is a very, very good player. I am impressed with him often.
Yeah.
Bama's defense is mid. Steal word from Tom Fornelli. That's the take I had. Just in watching
kind of so natural saying that, let me tell you.
Yes, exactly. Well, I was trying to think it doesn't really flow. There was a mid-zoo which flows. And I was trying to think, is it
Alabama Crimson mid?
Yes, it doesn't really work. But I went through and started looking at defenses that I think that are better than Bama's. And I had 6 for sure, and then a grouping of teams where I'm like, I think this is probably there in their ballpark. And the teams that I had in the ballpark were Arkansas, Auburn, and maybe South Carolina.
Oh, you mean within the SEC?
Yeah, just in the SEC.
I think South Carolina's defense is better than Alabama's.
Like I had them ahead, but I was like, are we sure? You know, they did just get worked by Ole Miss, but their offense struggled. They were on the field a long time, but I had them as better. I had Tennessee, Texas, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Kentucky, Oklahoma, all better than Alabama's defense.
I would agree.
I'm still not convinced of the Ole Miss defense. I mean, we could play the same game we just did with Alabama. It's like, let's go through who Ole Miss has played. Furman, Middle Tennessee, Wake, Georgia Southern, Kentucky, and South Carolina. Like, we'll get a much better idea of how good this Ole Miss defense actually is against LSU this weekend. But I think to your overall point, yeah, I think that Alabama's a top half of the SEC defense, which is a pretty damning statement compared to where Alabama typically is.
And we're coming out, and that's, we're coming out of the Georgia game talking about them competing for the SEC championship, and not necessarily as a prediction.
The offense is still really good.
Yes.
Right. I mean, like, they might have the second best offensive line in the conference.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Georgia didn't get a lot of pressure on those guys.
It's just so different that here we are talking about Bama like this. And I do think your team takes on the personality of your head coach. I think that's natural when you have an offensive-minded head coach and you've had a defensive-minded, maybe one of the best ever. I think there's going to be some characteristics that change. I think it's just shocking the way we're talking about it and why maybe they don't dominate as much as they did and why we're sitting here talking about, Tom, the stat you gave about the amount of points, the most amount of points scored against Nick Saban against Vanderbilt was 13, and they had 13 in the first quarter. I mean, that was unbelievable. By the way, I miss you guys on Saturday nights, kind of. Like when I hit the sleepy time tea and I'm like, oh, yeah, I've been working a long day. I actually really did miss the show because I was bummed you guys got to catch up with Bart, and that was awesome. That was really cool.
Yeah, he came through. And the dentist making his on-screen debut.
I just listened. I need to go back and watch video.
Oh, it's the shades are they're even more fitting of him than you saying mid.
Yeah. I thought like the dentist looked like he just got off the slopes.
Yeah. I was like, he'd come out of it did look a little bit like he'd come out of the champagne locker room, like he'd had the goggles on or something. I mean, it was
just wrapped up the NL West championship.
Yeah. Dennis was you could tell that there were some adult Vanderbilt alums and Nashville people of a certain stature that had just taken it deep.
The Commodores.
Yeah. Yeah, some kind of interesting. All right. Okay, so one last to sort of put a button on the Alabama defense thing. Do you think that obviously statistically we expect that they will perform better against South Carolina? Is this a fixable issue for the Alabama defense, or is this just what they're going to be?
I think it's fixable. There's no rule that says true freshmen can't get better as they get more acclimated to the scheme, right?
I mean, I think timing is going to matter because I do think South Carolina this week, they should be. I don't know. It's not going to be a problem. I think you can improve for sure. Fixable. I mean, I guess that means, what do you mean by fixable? Do you mean it's going to be great by the end of the year, or is it just going to improve?
Let's again call into old SEC stuff off the top of my head. There was a narrative that LSU quote unquote fixed its defense in 2019. Remember that it's like they started, making enough winning plays. They started playing a little bit better in the biggest games. I remember in the SEC championship game that year, they put the clamps on Georgia, not a Georgia explosive offense, but certainly played well enough to win that game and dominate doing so. So,
I think it'll be matchup dependent. Like, I think they can improve, but I do think, like, when they play Tennessee and they play LSU and maybe even Missouri, depending on how they look in that game, because those are 3 games in a row where you're facing much better receivers than you faced against Vandy, and you'll be facing this weekend against South Carolina.
Yep. All right. Coming up on the other side, Poll Assassin takes a look at the changes, which include a change at the very top. We get an update on the weekend in our Cover 3 Fantasy League, and upon further review, wants to take another look at those Tennessee Volunteers. All that and more next. Well, Texas Longhorns, Jeff Banks' squad, you're back on top. Let's get into it with Polis Husband. Do you think Ohio State has a better argument?
Yes.
Number one team in the country than what the
Yes.
AP top 25 poll suggests?
Yes. Texas's 2 best wins are Michigan, which is now what, 3-2 or 4-2. They've had 2 losses. I know that. And Mississippi State. Ohio State's beaten Michigan State and Iowa. And I think Iowa, of those 4, might be the best win to this point for any of those teams. I think that they have been more impressive week in and week out. I think that if you look at their non-conference schedules, I mean, Texas played Colorado State, UTSA, and ULM, although ULM is pretty decent. Ohio State played Akron, Western, and Marshall. So it's like I throw those out. I just look at how they've played in conference and against other Power 5 teams. And I think Ohio State's 2 wins by a combined total of 28, 31, 59 points are more impressive than Texas's wins over Michigan and Mississippi State.
I don't know. I still think going to the Big House, winning the way they did, dominating start to finish is impressive. More impressive than what Ohio State has done at home versus Iowa or on the road against Michigan State. I think it's really splitting hairs.
Yeah, I think it's splitting hairs more than the 52-9 first place vote, split is. That was the thing from the AP poll that stood out to me. I predicted that Texas would go to number 1. I thought that there would be more back and forth there than there was.
Probably the voters, and even like myself, are saying, well, I'll just flip them if Ohio State wins this weekend at Eugene. Because then I think if they do that, I think even no matter what, I mean, if Texas blows out, 2 touchdown favorite against Oklahoma, but I would expect more votes to come in Ohio State's way if they do beat Oregon. I think that's kind of what people are waiting for.
I just think you can make the argument that they beat the 3rd best version of Michigan, the Davis Warren version.
Well, that's not 100% sure yet, but it sure didn't look.
Yeah, what is the best?
We don't know. I bet we might see Davis Warren again. I'll just say that.
Honestly, they lost. They lost at Seattle, but I thought the offense looked better with Tuttle than it did at any other point in the year.
With the exception of the turnover stuff, yeah, I agree.
Well, the only reason they didn't turn it over with Orgy is because he never throws.
Well, no, but I think that's part of the equation here. Like, in order to overcome the turnovers, you need to be like a lot more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was interesting how it kind of opened up Edwards, the way that Washington started to play them, because Edwards wasn't doing a whole lot when Orgy was in.
Right.
I don't know with these receivers if a pocket passing quarterback is the best way to win. Like, these guys don't scare me if I'm a defensive coordinator in the Big Ten. They're not like. How much better are Michigan's receivers than Iowa's receivers? Like, they're better. And Iowa fans got mad at me when I said none of the Iowa receivers would be on scholarship at Ohio State. And now, after this weekend, I would like to triple down on that statement, actually. But like, is Michigan?
We'll find out, because one of their former receivers was on a scholarship at Ohio State.
Oh no! How are they going to replace what do you have? How many catches do you have this year? I don't know.
He has not been a factor.
Yeah.
I don't know. It is splitting hairs, but I think that the win over Iowa is more impressive at this point than what Texas beat in Michigan.
I did it again on Saturday night, just in the raw moment. I come on the reaction pod and I'm sitting here nitpicking an Ohio State victory. Then on Sunday, I have to fill out a CBS Sports 134 ballot, and I'm breaking everything down, and I put Ohio State at number 1. Like I think last week I said Oklahoma's not a top 25 team, and then I had to write out 25 teams, and sure enough, I put Oklahoma inside the top 25. It's like there are the emotional reactions sometimes that we give you just based on the vibes, what we take, our notes or notepad, but like actually hold my feet to the fire. I think Ohio State at this moment is the number 1 team in the country. I think the fact that they have not been able to meet my sky-high expectations does not mean that they don't deserve to be on top of all the other teams, most of whom are not meeting whatever your mind's eye is of what they could be. They have, I think they have the best defense in the entire country, and that with the how fast it can just snap on you. And I think that was seen. They come out, they're up 7-0 at halftime. They come out of the locker room, and wasn't it 4 straight touchdown drives or at least like touchdowns on 4 of their 5 second half possessions, like right out of the locker room. That's what good teams do. They take a close game and they put it away. And so I come out of the weekend more impressed with the Buckeyes maybe than I sounded on Saturday night.
I'll also say one thing to consider when you're splitting these hairs. One team has their starting quarterback healthy. The other doesn't.
See, I give them more credit for that, though. The fact that they have not dropped off a beat. And I don't know about – I think Ewers is back.
Hey,
what's that?
They've played ULM and Mississippi State.
Trust me, some teams that would devastate if they had a backup quarterback playing even against that competition.
Some teams, it would devastate their starting quarterback playing against that competition.
I knew it could possibly happen. Oh, by the way, shout out to a 3-way tie for 18th. You don't get to see all those.
You don't see that a lot, do you?
You don't see that a lot, but
poor old Indiana. You just can't throw them a bone.
I know.
Let them have 18 all by themselves.
You've got Indiana tied with a Kansas State team that got beat to hell by BYU and Oklahoma. It's like, come on, guys.
We made it inside the top 20, but you have to share it.
What do you do with that? Are you supposed to put like 18A, or is there like a denotion where you're supposed to put it at?
Well, don't let Kalen DeBoer figure it out. We'll have 2 number 2s on the field at the same time. Right. There's 2 number 18s out there. What's going to happen?
Ralph Russo leaves the AP and it just goes right to hell. 3 teams at 18.
Yeah, 2 teams at 11 too.
2 teams at 11. Yeah. Somebody's got to break these ties. Ralph's got to go back there and let him know how it's supposed to work.
But I am not surprised. I am disappointed that Missouri still there at 21. Michigan still there at 24. Still no Navy, still no Army. Come on, y'all.
Got to keep Alabama and Tennessee in the top 10.
So I released my projected college football playoff, and I had Boise getting the bye and not the Big 12 champion. Do you know? I'm going to save this other version that I almost ran, because what I do is I run my simulations and then I just take like an interesting one that is pretty high up in the probability. Next week's, if things play out this weekend, like I think, is going to be, it's going to break your brain.
If things play out this weekend. So basically for those, I have seen the graphic. We'll be sharing it on our social media. The idea is that Boise State likely has finished this season, with 1 loss? Mountain West champ?
12-1, and the 1 loss is a single score loss at a team that the committee will have hosting a playoff game in Oregon.
Yeah, and I just imagine that if that is like based on
it's like a 3-loss Big 12 champion team with 0 wins over any ranked teams.
Well, like, yeah, if you take the Boise State 1 loss, the only loss was to Oregon in a competitive game. They won all their other games. They were conference champion. Like, historically, those teams, unless it was the Cincinnati team that actually made the playoff, they're like number 8 or 9. They are up inside the top 10. And so the theory then would be your Big 12 champion is lower than that.
To Bud's point, I think way too many people are just getting a little bit lazy and just putting Boise State in at 12. Just right. I mean, because they could even if they don't get the first round bye, there's a really good chance they could be
9, 10, 8.
Yeah, they probably should be.
But here's why I would push back against that. Because even if they finish 11-1, what's their best win?
Well, 12-1. And they would have beaten UNLV twice, which has 2 wins over Big 12 teams.
And also
UNLV went on the road to Kansas and won, and they also beat Houston.
Yeah, but UNLV might still lose. I just look at Boise State's schedule, and it's like the best thing on their resume is they hung tough with Oregon right now. And I'm not saying they're not a good team and they're not going to win the Mountain West and they won't deserve the spot. I am skeptical that a Boise State team that hasn't beaten anybody will be ranked over the Big 12 champion.
What do you think?
Who will the Big 12 champion have beaten? I think that's one of your issues here. Like, if they have 3 losses, like, what good wins are they going to have?
Well, currently looking at the rankings, there's one Big 12 team at 11. There's another at 14. There's another at 16. There's one tied for 18. I just think that the committee will look at the Big 12 as a much tougher league than the Mountain West. And I know my numbers also suggest that the Big 12, while not a great league, is a much tougher league than the Mountain West.
From a league standpoint, but like, I mean, you would take Boise over everybody except for what? Rising Utah at this point, I think. Or do you think,
no,
well, I
we-
guess
I'm not Utah. Until Rising's dead, I have pushed Utah
sure.
out the
Okay,
paint.
fair. Yeah.
The Big 12
I'd take
right
Iowa
now.
State
Yeah,
over
the Big 12 right
Boise.
now is hanging its hopes on Iowa State and BYU.
Yeah, Iowa State's a 3-point favorite this weekend in Morgantown.
Mhm.
Yeah. Mhm.
Like if the Big 12 champ is 3 losses, maybe. But even then, I'm not sure. I think it's going to take like an 9-4 Big 12 champion for Boise or any other G5 team to jump them.
I don't know. I think they'll start leapfrogging them. Like you mentioned, those teams, if they start picking each other up and Boise just keeps rolling, you know what I think it hurts maybe more than their ranking is probably Ashton Genty's Heisman hopes. Because I was having that conversation this morning, and I do, like, you start looking at his numbers and they're off the charts. But, you know, it's Utah State, as you guys mentioned after. At some point, I do think the competition he's facing hurts him.
Just put together those numbers, baby. Just get to 2,700.
Yeah.
Then we can we can start having that conversation. Anything else from the AP top 25 poll that stands out after the latest update?
I mean, Missouri, I guess that the win over Vandy looks better for them.
True. It's
Get them out. Come on. I mean, that's got to be Missouri's fantastic journalism school coming through in the clutch. You know?
Yeah.
I just feel like at this point of the season, when most teams have only played 5 and a few have played 6, if you have a 2-loss team on your ballot, you're just being lazy. You're just looking at names and going up and down and just like, oh, well, Michigan. Yeah, they're 4-2, but they're Michigan. They're at USC. Oh, it's 3. They're 3-2, but they're USC. It's just you're not putting the effort into your ballot, which, you know what? I get. For some people, you've got a deadline and a story to file, and you really don't have time to be up until 4 a.m. filling out your ballot to make sure you don't have a single transgression in there that nobody could pick apart. But some spots are easy. When there are as many 1-loss and undefeated teams like, you know, your Navies, your Armies, your Nebraskas, your Washington States, your Texas Techs, all these teams that have had good starts, you could just throw them in place of Michigan on your ballot.
Surprised Texas Tech didn't get more, but yeah, I mean, I guess when you see 352 voting points for Missouri and 170 voting points for that 2-loss Michigan team, that's where those spots went on the ballot. We will see if they continue. Coming up on the other side, we go under the hood with a pun further review, which includes how do we react to that late night comeback? 25 points. What does it mean for the U? All that and more next.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged with the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
That streak could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending. The chaos continues.
Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, we have an excellent way that we have been highlighting some of our favorite individual performances of the season, and it has been in the Cover 3 Fantasy League. So looking back at the week that was in week 6, it was Inner Sandman bringing it home again, 191 to 179 over Danny's Beard. Look, when you've got Diego Pavia, you know, that's going to be a fast path to success. I was also happy to see Oronde Gadsden in that fast track out in Allegiant Stadium. For Bud's team, Danny's Beard, Jalen Milroe obviously is going to be putting up a ton, 310 passing yards. Dylan Sampson, big day on the ground. Darius Taylor shouldering all the load for Minnesota's offense. Close game, Bud, but
yeah, my receivers just, they continue to suck, man. Like I just did a bad job picking receivers this year. This is like my best guy has just barely over 101 touchdown. We picked like 7 or 8 of them. You know, I don't know. Like these freshman receivers, you guys who drafted Williams and Jeremiah are. I mean, you're getting it every single week. It's incredible.
And that also,
and Chip's team is just running away with this league. This is
currently
no
holding
joke.
currently
Draft
holding
tight ends.
5-1 record. Tom, the Llamas,
223.
Wow,
bro,
That's right. That's a damn juggernaut. We're back.
What'd you make? Hey, listen. We didn't get to really highlight Trevor Etienne a lot. I didn't get a lot of eyes on that Georgia Auburn game. He played well. I know that's just 88 yards and 2 touchdowns on 16 attempts, but I felt like that was one of the better games I've seen since Etienne showed up in Athens. But what'd you make of your performance here?
Yeah, he was also throughout the passing game. He had 6 catches for 36 yards. LaQuint Allen is my hero, finishing just absolutely going off against UNLV with 71 yards rushing, 58 on the ground, 9 catches and 4 total touchdowns to get me 41.4 points. Shout out to him. His first real big performance of this season for me so far. I think he's the first time he's counted for me in my standings. And then, of course, my Ohio State investment now begins to pay off. They were kind of coasting against those little non-con games, but 41.25 from Will Howard, who kept him to throw a couple more touchdowns to Jeremiah Smith. Xavier Restrepo coming through for me against Cal late night when everybody was in bed. Restrepo was running up the score on Danny, and then Tet McMillan being Tet McMillan.
Yeah, he's right back in the zone. Is Arizona trustworthy enough to win as a team? No. But is Tetero McMillan trustworthy to go get you about 9 to 15 catches for somewhere in the range of 120 to 180 yards? Yes, we can count on that. Inner Sandman, Chip's team, 5-1 on the season. Danny's Beard at 3-3. Bo Nix Hall of Fame and the Lava Llamas both at 2-4 on the weekend. All right, Mondays is the time for us to give a second look to some of the action that we tried to take in during the fire hose that was the Week 6 Saturday. We go punt for the review. There were terrible calls. Do we want to go ahead and jump in?
After further review.
Bud, you had this one out, and I think it was good as a follow, again, because, when we're live, we're just jumping right in the wake of Arkansas going out and taking down Tennessee. When you started to take a look at Tennessee and start to project it moving forward, what really stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, do we have to start reconsidering what Tennessee is, considering they have faced, some pretty bad offenses and then some offenses that are playing backup quarterbacks in the second halves against them, right? Kent State's kid got knocked around pretty good. Arkansas came back on them with a backup quarterback and backup running back as well, because the Arkansas kid was out, both QB and running back. Obviously McCall, got pretty dinged up there. I don't know. I still kind of think Tennessee is pretty good, but I'm a little bit less in on them now than I was a week ago, obviously. And at the same time, they didn't hit any deep shots and still led the game 14-3. This game, what did the game close? 14?
Mm-hmm.
If you line it again, it's probably what, Tennessee
10.5? 10?
Yeah. You're not, it's not a 7-point adjustment. I don't think. I mean, Arkansas played their butts off. They deserved to win on the field. And I think they exposed some things, with Tennessee. We have to be careful changing teams too much when somebody jumps on somebody with a game plan that they didn't expect, right? Because not every single team is going to have that ability every week. But I was disappointed in how they played. So I'm just looking at my priors. I'm like, okay, should they be that good? Are they really that good? I guess we'll find out.
Second road game in a row. Didn't perform well. Had a bad night. Got a nice little run of 4 straight home games coming up here, starting this week at Florida. So we're getting back to that easy non-con kind of slate level tier of teams. They'll take care of the Gators pretty easily. And then there's that showdown in Knoxville on the 19th against Alabama. I think we'll find out whether this team is still good at that point or not. Where'd Danny go?
Let's see.
Here.
You good?
There we go.
Yes.
Hurricane Milton, which is barreling down at us, is definitely causing some issues. I don't know. Now I'm on my Wi-Fi just went out. I don't know. We're getting a lot of rain, but it's not that bad. But this will be an interesting week for sure. Bud's the one who needs to make sure he's got all supplies in check.
Yeah, I did a little of that this morning. I don't know. I have a hard time getting worried about hurricanes in Orlando, knock on wood, but like
same.
The overnight thing for this, what odds would you put that this Memphis at USF Friday night game gets played?
Not good.
I'd put it at like 0.
Yeah.
At least in Tampa. Like if the current track holds, I would be really hard pressed to see the city of Tampa hosting a college football game 30 hours after this thing hits. Like that's
Can we stick with Tennessee for just a second?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. I'm not talking down to a hurricane.
Chip says hurricane. I ain't scared of no damn hurricane.
I did not say that. So their receivers were getting banged up all throughout this game.
Yeah.
Which had me going like in the moment going through and being like, okay, so what is the receiver depth here? Like, what is the skill player depth? The offense in general, we understand that the way it functions kind of is some of the like single home run and that spreading the field and playing with pace and playing with tempo. And we know that Nico Iamaleava is the talent is absolutely through the roof. Tom, you mentioned this is the second straight road game, and in both performances, we've seen a noticeable drop off in terms of the offensive production. Is Tennessee special from a personnel perspective outside of Dylan Sampson when it comes to the talent around Nico?
I don't think there's a bunch of first, second round receivers around him, but I do think there are good receivers around him. And I do think that the way that scheme works, they typically do a very good job of getting those guys open for explosives. And I think Arkansas deserves, I haven't gone back to rewatch it yet, but I would say Arkansas probably deserves some credit for limiting the explosives with what they were doing defensively. So,
and what they were doing was whipping Tennessee up front. I thought the defensive line did a great job.
Yeah, their offensive line is not, Tennessee's offensive line is not incredible.
No,
that could be the weakness.
Agreed.
That's pretty simple for you, Bud?
I think so. I thought you had to be pretty disappointed that they got the guys back who went down in the Oklahoma game. They got a bye to get right, and they just got whipped kind of in certain spots by what Arkansas has up front.
Do you think? I think Josh Heupel knows more than anybody that he's dealing with a first-year starting quarterback. Considering the way he called the game against Oklahoma on the road, they were up again. I think he probably sees. I mean, obviously sees way more of Nico. I think he understands the risks that are there. I don't know. I think this is normal, but I think you're seeing the growing pains of having a first-year starting quarterback who's uber talented, but he's super young.
Since November 4th, 2022, Josh Heupel is 7-7 in SEC play. That's the Georgia game at the end of that magical 2022 run. So I was like, okay, this might be a team that could use a first or second round pick. This might be a team that could use having just like a real make the defensive coordinator lose sleep over it type of player on the outside, just to help. Like if we are going to have the conversation about Tennessee, like they're going to go compete for a national championship. Just a thought, just something that came to mind looking back at it.
I think that's fair.
For the Miami Hurricanes, Danny, was Sleepy Time Tea already in effect? Well before.
Oh yeah, way back. I record them, so I get up early.
I know. Hey, look, you've got great access. I woke up. You've got Connor Stalions level access to everything that you need.
Exactly. No, but I woke up and I went to bed assuming they were going to lose. And I woke up to like a text at 2:42 in the morning, whatever time that game went final. And I have a buddy of mine who's a massive Hurricane fan. And all it said was, Reese Davis hates Miami. I just started laughing because whenever your team is kind of, it's not doing well, Reese is one of the most neutral guys in the business. Shout out to him who was fighting through that voice issue he had. But I was like, did Miami lose? And then, of course, I went and watched it and saw what happened. Where do we go with this Miami loss? Because, or not the loss, but the bailed out by the refs again. And I do think it's interesting because the reason I mentioned loss is I do think people are holding these two games against Miami more than they're holding Alabama losing to Vanderbilt or Ole Miss losing to Kentucky. They're like, well, they should have lost, and they're holding that against Miami more. A lot of obstacles. I saw a Marcelo tweet that teams in the Big Ten who have traveled across 2 time zones are 1-8.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about that. It is an issue that you have to go. Man, the ACC's got an officiating problem, and it's been there for a long time. And I think it's pretty embarrassing that it's playing out for their brand on this stage. But if you're Miami, you don't apologize for it.
I will push back that they've been bailed out by the refs 2 weeks in a row. The Virginia Tech call was the right call. That wasn't a bailout.
Totally. And I'm glad they didn't call it targeting on that. I'm glad they have tightened up the targeting rule that allows you to get out of these things. Like, that's a good hit. Okay. It's a passionate, violent game. We don't want to watch just 7-on-7. It's not like he just totally lowered the head and just went headshot only. Like 2 objects are moving and changing directions. Like, I don't know. I like, as a guy that hates the targeting call, I'm glad that it was not called like that. That's
but don't you think, like, I agree. I wish they would dial it way back. You're not going to put that thing back. You're not putting that back in. Don't you think by the letter of the law? And that's where I thought Brock Osweiler was pretty good on it, like telling you the indicators. It's so, here's why I don't get upset about it, because they never get targeting right. Like, it's no consistency. That's where I'm like, this is just the way it goes. But I do think it was targeting. That's where I do think if you're Cal, and they still had timeouts left. Like, I don't know if what would have happened. Definitely a call, but I think it was targeting. I don't like that it should have been, but I think it was by rule.
They seem to be doing a little bit better job of, if you make contact, like even slightly shoulder first, which I think he kind of did. I think the shoulder hits first slightly. Like, they seem to be doing a little bit better job of, hey, like, if you're just totally, arms at the sides, like, we're launching a guy with our helmet only. But if you go shoulder first a little bit, I think they're trying to, like, get away from this slightly, because I've seen fewer this year that are just totally jacking up games. But on the Miami point, or sorry, Tom has something. Go ahead, Tom. I'm changing subject slightly.
I just going to say back to just one last thing on the officials. You can argue whether it was targeting or not all you want. Cal blew a 25-point lead. That wasn't the officials' fault. Y'all took a big lead and thought you won the game and stopped playing. And then you just let Miami, a much more talented team, come back and beat you. You can yell at the refs all you want. You blew the game.
Really conservative. I mean, it was just
they thought they won.
Yeah.
They're like, game over. They were like everybody who went to bed. They're like, well, this one's done.
A couple things.
Do you think
I thought... No, go ahead, Danny.
Do you think you can tighten up Cam Ward? Because it's really a tricky dynamic, because you love the way he plays. You love the way he makes plays. I think I'm with Tom. I think it's just who he is, and you just hope it doesn't end up devastating you at some point. The pick 6 across his body looked like it might have been one of those, oh gosh, this is going to cost him the game. But then his heroics bring you back, and he finished this game, with 400 plus and a massive comeback.
Yes.
I would say this. I would rather have a guy like that than a check down Charlie who's just dinking and dunking, and you're like, hey, can you make a couple throws down the field? I would rather have that. But my goodness, if you're a Miami fan, you're holding your breath every time he starts scrambling.
You know what you signed up for. This ain't new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, I think if you're Miami, you thought you were going to coach this out of him. No. The guy's played a lot of college football. This is who he is. I will say the one thing I think you're pretty encouraged about if you're a Miami fan is you got the ball back a lot of times. If you're going to play this style with Cam Ward, you want to play a high possession game. A lot of different times you're going to get the ball. The good will probably outweigh the bad, and there will likely be some bad. Cal did a nice job of clouding the picture, like post the 15-second mark, to make Cam Ward operate without the helmet comms. And then for the final 20 minutes, I think he figured him out pretty well and carved him. Here's the other thing I think you got to be really, very heartened if you're a Miami fan. You were 12th this week in defensive success rate. You were also like 130th in explosive rate allowed. one of those things is a lot more sustainable than the other. Okay. Success rate doesn't chase explosive rate. Explosive rate typically regresses back to what your success rate is for the most part, unless you play like some Western Kentucky style, like Joe Lee Dunn. We're going to blitz like insane every play. And Miami does that sometimes. But what I'm saying is, if you have a 67.3% defensive success rate, which Miami did on the weekend, these explosive plays that they allowed were for the most part kind of fluky. And if you played that again, I think we would pick Miami by double digits after seeing that, because what's more likely to sustain is the success rate and not the explosive plays. So if I'm a Miami fan, I don't leave that situation like all that concerned, to be honest.
I also think too, with Miami's defense, like that secondary is a problem for them right now. So they are going to be prone to giving up those big plays from time to time. It's really going to be dependent on the pass rush. Like if they get home and they pressure the QB, their secondary is going to be okay as long as the ball is forced to get out quick. But like any secondary, the longer you force those guys to cover in particular, the more trouble they're in.
Miami off this week, and then they play at Louisville, which, I mean, we talk about a secondary and explosive, like the explosive play rate might regress eventually, but you got to tighten that up. Oh, it's the Tyler Barron revenge game for all that time that Tyler Barron spent at Louisville. Here we go. Yeah, it'll be Miami.
I forgot Tyler Barron was at Louisville. So you just
it's a small chapter in that young man's career.
Like if I had to get what number, if you were a Miami fan, could I give you today that you would feel safe? Like, okay, if we score 40, are we guaranteed to win?
At Louisville?
I'd say 34.
Yeah. It's definitely high 30s.
Man, I think 34 might be a bit of a sweat. Like,
I think it's going to be a fun game.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Oh, it'll be a fun game.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Because if there's somebody who knows how to scheme up some explosive plays, I would give Jeff Brom the opportunity to be able to do it. Now, can he catch them? Can the balls not bounce off face masks? These are important things to figure out. Tom, what'd you have from the week?
We didn't talk much about Rutgers and Nebraska on Saturday night, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful football game, as beautiful as you would expect a game that finished with a 14-7 final score to be. And I just going over rewatching it, that was like Ethan Kaliak-Manis's stats were very Ethan Kaliak-Manis, but so were Dylan Raiola's, who did not look good at all. I broke it down. He was 13 of 27 overall, but 6 of his completions were behind the line of scrimmage. Like if you break it on throws of 5 air yards or fewer, he was 10 of 14 for 61 yards for 4.4 yards per attempt. Anything over 5, he was 3 of 13 for 73 yards, 5.6 attempt, but he also had interception. And what the more concerning thing to me is, I've talked about how he's a little too casual back there. He was sacked 3 times, and in 3 Big Ten games, after taking 1 sack in the first 3 games, including against Colorado, he's taken 9 sacks in 3 conference games. And he's also losing a bunch of yards on all of them too. It's one of those fading back and back and back situations where instead of being in like maybe 2nd and 14, you're now at 2nd and 18. And I just think that for Nebraska right now, who to me, they've got good receivers. Their defense is strong. I do feel like going through the rest of conference play, this is like he needs to kind of start ironing out some of these freshman things, or else they're probably going to lose a few more games.
Big stretch coming up here for Nebraska. Will be
at least he's not making the mistakes they made last year. Last year was so bad, and that's what we all thought. Nebraska was going to be better this year because they would get better play. Even though Dylan Raiola may not be Superman, it would be better. And I know it wasn't pretty, but it's been better than it was last year. But I agree. I totally agree with you. It drives me nuts. The cool factor, like trying to look nonchalant and just it drives me nuts. And that's a very trendy style of quarterback play right now with younger players, and they've got to snap out of it.
It's the Steph Curry effect. Like everybody just started chucking threes all the time.
Now
everybody's trying to be Mahomes. Yeah. Got to coach it out of them.
So Nebraska off this week, back in action on the 19th at Indiana. Nvidiana. And then they follow that up with at Ohio State. So, all right, Dylan, let's tighten it up. Danny, what'd you have on the notepad?
I think I was wrong on SMU.
Ooh.
I've been really impressed by what they've done. I think they should be way higher than their ranking is. I mean, way higher, 4 or 5 spots higher than checking in at 24. Their only loss to a BYU team, which is top 15 and undefeated. The way they've been winning games, and I think I get a little bit of an out because I didn't know Kevin Jennings was going to do this, and that was a little bit of a pleasant surprise. I think even for SMU fans who thought it was going to be Preston Stone, but man, he works really well in Rhett Lashley's system, and I think the defense has just enough to kind of be dangerous where you start looking at the way things play out, and if they handle their business, 10-2, it's not outrageous.
I gained it. I wrote
even
about
like maybe you start.
The schedule is like the thing I think you had to like most about this team entering the season. Now they got Jennings in there, like they look totally different.
So I think
I am the resident SMU not liker on this show.
Yeah, 8-0 in ACC play is on the table. 7-1 in ACC play probably includes like a disappointing loss somewhere. I mean, this is an SMU team that will be playing for a spot in the ACC championship game as we get into November, and therefore could be playing for a spot to go compete for it all. It's wild. Did you see Rhett Lashley talking after the game? He got real choked up talking about Preston Stone, who came in. Remember, Kevin Jennings gets shaken up. He gets taken off, so he has to be replaced. Preston Stone comes in. They're at like the 5-yard line, and then there's a false start. And then it's like, oh, God. And he still has to stay in there. Jennings can't come back in. He said, Rhett said that Preston saw the defense, checked to the fade route, and then delivered an absolute dime where only his receiver could pull it in for a touchdown pass. And he said what he got choked up on, he was like, who else has a player like Preston Stone that after everything that's happened can come in and just deliver that kind of play? Like there seems to be he seems to really like this group, we really like our group. Yeah. Like I think he really likes the locker room that they've put together. And so I do give them a decent chance to not totally trip over themselves, to play to their expectation, to play to their standard, and to still be in the running for this thing all the way down to the end of the season.
Over under 1.5 more losses for the SMU Mustangs this season. Where are you guys at?
Regular season?
Yeah, in conference play.
Under.
Gosh.
Yeah, 1.5 more?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 1.5 more.
Betting the way the college football season has gone this year, I'd say over. So that's but I think they're real. I think they're playing. I think maybe they do have something special, like Rhett Lashley's been saying.
So they get
what's their next game against Stanford? And that's
they're on a bye this week, and at Stanford, at Duke, Pitt, BC, at Virginia, Cal.
Part of this is going to hinge. Is Stanford get either quarterback back who can throw? Because they're running Wildcat right now with Lamson. Like Lamson can't, like he looks like a tight end playing quarterback. So the other two kids, the Daniels,
Ashton
and
Daniels,
and the other backup who can throw is Brown. Those two being out means they just have Wildcat options right now. So if they don't have him in by October 19th, then probably under a 1.5.
Pitt, BC, and Cal all in Dallas. You go play at Duke. You go play at UV. I mean, it is a you determine. If SMU plays down to Duke and UVA in those road spots, then they could lose. So
they're very turnover dependent. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. That was a big win. Big win for SMU. I like that. I like that call right there.
You guys keep doing the show. I got to check something.
Somebody's going to post-game win expectance me into a...
No. I don't believe in that crap.
Yeah, thank you. You win the ball game on the field.
Yeah. Do you know who has the highest points off turnover margin in the country right now?
Is it SMU?
Yeah, it's 63. The next closest is Tulane at 47.
Over half of that, I think, was in the TCU game, and a good bit of that as well was in the FSU game.
Yeah.
They have 70 points off of turnovers. They've only allowed 7. Something tells me it's going to be really difficult for them to maintain that over the rest of the season.
Tom's a turnover truther. I like it.
Drive to 325, but we got
Let's do it.
All right,
yes, we do.
Wild
we hit the goal.
Yeah, let's go.
Boys, we hit it. Let's go. Only needed 6, got 7. Still on pace. Now, can you get 30 hosting Washington? Don't know. Here's where it gets kind of hard. Can you get 30 at Michigan State? Do we know the status of Iowa's quarterback? Or are they going to switch to somebody not Cade McNamara?
I have not heard anything of that.
I hope so.
Yeah. I haven't heard anything specific about that. I know some fans who feel that way.
It's about to get tougher because like UCLA's defense is still playing really hard. Michigan State is still trying. Yeah, this might be tough, but we're on pace. We're on pace.
Michigan State and UCLA, I feel like we've been exposed to how limited they are compared to their peers, but they're to your point, Bud, they are competing. Like that, Michigan State playing to the whistle. We signed up for all 60 in Eugene. We're going to go out there. We're going to keep trying to take swings at this thing. Oregon had already packed up and started looking at the Ohio State game plan, and Jonathan Smith said, "No, sir, been a part of this rivalry for too long. I ain't going down like that." And UCLA, like just going out there and making it difficult on Penn State. Those are games that teams at the top of the Big Ten are likely going to win, but it is not going to be easy. So a couple first-year coaches in the conference that I think recent performances, at least, I'm giving them a nice little check mark, even in a losing effort along the way. Anything else from the weekend?
It's not just from the weekend. It's from the season. It's one of my favorite stats of the year so far. Kansas is 1-5 with a point differential on the year of +17.
Have you guys seen the graphic of their win expectancies in game?
Yes.
I'm going to share this with Mikey in the private chat if we can get this on screen. This is unbelievable.
Yep. I will. While we wait, I will say Kansas has more one-score losses than any other team in the country at 4, and the team with the most one-score wins right now is Texas Tech.
I will not buy in on Kansas based on like things have to turn the other way, because I have watched some of these one-score losses, and it is not. No, I don't want.
There's one.
I don't want any part of this.
It's every game.
Yeah, it is every game.
Oh, that West Virginia one was so bad.
What was somebody shared a stat with me? Hold on, let me find it.
Oh God, look at there's the UNLV.
Look at this UNLV.
Yeah, here we go. According to Nick Johnson, big play coach Jay on Twitter, my Jayhawks are being outscored 62-0 in the final 2 minutes of each half the last 5 games. Dabo talked about the middle 8. We're talking about the final 4.
I mean, what happened? I mean, is there a recipe for this?
Listen, you have super talented rosters. There's not as much luck involved. Everybody else, luck plays a whole hell of a lot more of an impact in this sport than people want to admit.
So I don't think it's just losing Andy Kotelnicki. Though maybe you could apply that as specifically to the quarterback play, or why Jalen Daniels hasn't even recaptured the best of his own performance as a college player. But there's like something structural. There's something's off right now at Kansas.
Yeah.
They lost their home field too. Like that's an issue this year where, that's
good point.
Doesn't totally turn things around. I also think, there's quarterback regression. We've seen this a lot. I heard you guys mention that on the Cover 3. I think this is clearly one of those quarterback regression things. Maybe he felt better with Kotelnicki, because they didn't make some huge different shakeup. They elevated. So it's like you would think it'd be okay. But, it's just, and I don't think they have the margin for error, clearly, as we're talking all these one-score losses. Like, you start losing a little bit of edge, it's going to be exploited pretty bad.
And we've talked about this with Kansas for years too. Like, psychologically, when you're playing in a lot of these close games and you keep losing them at the end because you're messing up, in the back of your head, when you're in that next close game, you're sitting there thinking, oh God, I hope we don't screw this up. Like, teams get in their own head, and that's one of the bigger challenges. Like we talked about, one of the bigger challenges for Matt Rule at Nebraska is not just going to be improving the team, but it's going to be getting them in a mindset to where they expect to win and know how to win late in games. And right now, I think this Kansas team is really going through it, where when it's a close game at the end, there is that kind of just dark cloud hanging over their heads of, oh my God, what's going to go wrong this time?
You know what else happens too? You start getting everybody's best effort. Like, for a while, Kansas people are, like, it's human nature to think you're walking in and winning, and you don't prepare as much. And then all of a sudden they have a couple good years in a row, and you're dialed in, and your coaches are dialed in, and everybody's focus is, at an all time. They're not at all time, but they're ready for you. You're not slipping by anybody.
100%. All right. Tuesday, we are going to be back in our 2 p.m. Eastern time slot on CBS Sports Network, getting you set for an absolutely massive weekend ahead in the Big Ten. We will have Penn State at USC on CBS, and then, of course, that Ohio State at Oregon game in prime time. Big game breakdowns for both those games. If you can't catch us live on CBS Sports Network, you can watch the episode on YouTube, youtube.com/cover3, or listen to it wherever you get your podcast. Then on Wednesday, we will be back here live at youtube.com/cover3, where we are going to be doing more of our big game breakdowns. It gives us a chance to look at those Texas Longhorns as they get set for the Red River rivalry against Oklahoma, the LSU and Ole Miss, and so much more. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fornelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow him at Danny Kanell. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Stay safe, Florida.
See ya.